Hello everybody and welcome to another amazing video of DIY investing. For today's video, we're going to be talking about the coming super cycle that I believe is taking place. We're going to be mapping out where I believe that Bitcoin is going to be headed alongside Ethereum, because these two are setting up for what I believe is truly going to be one of the most extraordinary cycles we have ever experienced thus far. The people that are positioning themselves early into this cycle, pretty much right where we're at right now, are going to be the ones that set themselves up to make the most money possible. And I want to be able to give you guys my thoughts on the way that I'm expecting this market to play out as this market cycle takes place. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And with that being said, let's jump right into this amazing video today. Alrighty guys, so here we are to start off today's video. We are going to be jumping into Bitcoin, and then we're going to be going into Ethereum, and I'm going to be giving you guys my summarized thoughts on what I believe is going to be playing out over this cycle. Now here's the big thing. When we're looking at Bitcoin, I think the most important thing to remember, as in the short time frames over the last week, or what I should say really the last month, we finally had a breakout from this range being 25K. So we now have a confirmed breakout. I have seen a lot of people on Twitter and really just all over the place, all of social media for crypto, talking about how they actually think that the market's going to top right here and we're going to pull back. And there's definitely a possibility where we pull back and retest this neckline of this inverse head and shoulder. But the way that the market looks to me, I honestly believe that we're most likely just going to continue to trend up. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the SPX continues to break out. Crypto is directly tied to the S&P 500, so if it's going to continue to break out, we should expect to see crypto to continue to rise as well. So in the short term, I believe that this is going to keep going up. And when we're looking at this, now that it actually broke out of this range, we're pretty much waiting on what I believe is this next leg up that's going to finally break out the altcoins as well. When we look at the total market cap over here, we can see that this is just waiting for a breakout. It's consolidating right on that resistance. Unlike Bitcoin, where we've already broken out of the neckline here, the total market cap is just sitting right under consolidating at that resistance. So the second that I believe that Bitcoin finally gets that next leg up, gets a little bit of momentum to push it forward, that's where we're going to finally see those altcoins start to take off. But here's the big thing, guys. This is the total market cap. So whenever this market cap chart breaks out, and because this is a long-term range that we've been in, this is a long-term bottom formation. Now when it really comes down to it, a lot of people are going to disagree with me on that, but the truth of the matter is everything is lining up for this to be a bottom. Now when we're looking at this, we've been inside of this consolidation for just under 300 days. So that's a long-term bottom formation. And the reason why I believe that is so has everything to do with the fact that we've already got our 4-year cycle bottom flashing, and that was indicated by this cycle low happening here after the FTX collapse that took place in November at the end of the year of last year. And so that completed a 4-year cycle low. And so the second that the total market cap is finally able to break outside of this resistance, get a little bit higher, that's the point where altcoins are going to run. And when we come over here and actually look at the price of Ethereum, I think it's really important that we're analyzing this, because this is really where I think that things are going to get interesting. I believe that into this cycle, we're going to see a big outperformance inside of the altcoins along the lines of what we saw in 2017. And I've said that, I'm going to continue to say that. People are going to disagree, but the only reason people are doubting that has everything to do with the fact that we're still at the early point of this bull run. The second that the market picks back up even more, we see the markets break out and go even higher. That's where everybody's going to get a lot more optimistic about that happening. But as of right now, most people aren't expecting it. But this is what I'm seeing playing out inside of the markets. Ethereum looks exactly like it did in 2017, right before it set up for that massive expansion into that 2017 bull run. And we can come over here and also look at the altcoin total market cap chart and see that in this first leg up, which was that exact chart of Ethereum I just shared with you, this is just a log scale version, this first leg up looks identical to this most recent cycle that we just went through. And what that is just a retest and a breakout of the prior all-time high of the last cycle, going into new all-time highs, right? This is going into price discovery. So the reason why I believe that this cycle is going to be so much more powerful is because our entire first cycle in 2018, all the way throughout really even all the way into 2021, that was the point where we finally broke out of all-time highs. It's taken us all of that time to finally break out. And then once we broke out, we didn't really go that high, and then we spent even more time consolidating on top of those prior all-time highs of the 2017 cycle top as support. It is very, very much the same consolidation that we experienced back in 2016. And so it would make sense that if we follow the same consolidation then the price of Ethereum would also look very much the same as that first cycle, to which it does. And that's what I think is really interesting when we're talking about what is happening with Bitcoin, because Bitcoin itself just broke out of a long-term range. You know, we're waiting on the total market cap to break out of this, but Bitcoin itself has already broken out, as we would expect to see, considering the fact Bitcoin always leads the cycles. So now that Bitcoin is broken out of this, this is, nearly a year-long range. Close, not all the way a year, but it's a pretty long-term range. It's a longer range that we've spent inside of here than what we saw inside of the last cycle low that brought Bitcoin all the way up to $14,000 to the 618. Inside of this cycle, I actually think that the move that we're going to be seeing out of this breakout is going to be much more similar to what we actually saw in that 2019 cycle, where we run all the way up to the 618 Fibonacci, which, if you guys don't know where that is, it's going from the high down to the low. The 618 is going to be $48,500, which is pretty much our first lower high in the bear market. That's where I honestly think that we are going to be heading in the short term for the markets. And so there's going to be a lot of profit to be made, but this kind of sets the stage for this next cycle. And I wanted to talk about where I think we could actually see Bitcoin's price over the course of the next few months, going into this year and even next year, because we need to see a few different things if we're going to truly see a super cycle in the markets. Keep in mind, I did share with you guys this chart that did show why I think that the market is setting up for a super cycle. I also shared with you guys the Ethereum chart and how identical it looks in the exact same way that it did leading into that 2017 cycle. But now we're going to be talking a little bit about what we need to see over the course of this next year to actually confirm that that's going to happen. So first things first, guys, if we're talking about this cycle, we need to be mapping out our time frames, because this is what's going to be giving us the most clear indication of when to be taking profits and when to also be looking to potentially re-enter back into the market. So right off the bat, if we're starting a new 4-year cycle like we already have, the cycle low in 2018 was exactly 4 years from the cycle low in 2022 that we just went through. So at the same time, we just began a new 4-year cycle. So it should be 4 years from our cycle low being in November. 1,450 days takes us to here. We'll draw another point. And then we should be expecting another cycle low sometime at the end of the year of 2026. That will be the bottom of our next bear market. Keep in mind, guys, that we also need to measure the distance in between, being 725 days. So we'll measure one right there, close enough. And then that's going to be giving us our cycle. So the way that I see this, guys, if we're going to be ending up following a similar type of path to what we actually saw inside of this last cycle, then I think it's important to highlight a few things. Number one, our halving. That's something we need to talk about. But then also number two, the way that the structure is going to look. And I think up to this point, we're behaving very much the same as what our 2019 cycle kind of did. And so if we end up seeing the same type of move where we come up to the 618, we would expect to have some type of reaccumulation phase. Now, the thing is, this was the COVID sell-off. I don't think that we're going to have another black swan event. You never really know, but I don't think that we're going to have that same type of a move. So most likely, we can just erase that, and then we would have a much more consistent type of bottom as we go into that next cycle. And so if that's the case, the big thing that we need to see if we're going to truly have a super cycle, or what I would say just a normal 4-year cycle. When I say super cycle, I'm merely just mapping out the potential of this next cycle, a 4-year cycle, being massively overextended in price, being much more similar to what we saw in 2017. I believe that the time frames will still follow a normal 4-year cycle, but that's what we need to see, is us to actually cross past this midway point. If our cycle tops past this midway point, then at that point it's going to be a right translation. And so we would expect to see this cycle consolidate like it has in prior ones. Now keep in mind, I just used the last bull run to use as a consolidation example, but the market structure itself is always going to vary. Each and every cycle is always going to be a little bit different. So the run up might look the same as far as it being parabolic, leading to some type of cycle top in the short term, and then the reconsolidation pattern will obviously differ. We don't know exactly how it will vary, but we just have to pay attention to anything. Inside of all of our cycles, we've spent roughly the exact same sort of phase, where if we draw the point from the cycle low, and then we draw another one to the next cycle low, and then we measure the midway point being 728 days, every single one of our last cycles have pretty much ended up being right around those all-time highs when we start to hit that midway point. And then every single one of our cycles in years past has actually topped to the right side of the midway point. So we would expect to see, if we're going to end up having a normal 4-year cycle where Bitcoin's actually able to rally up in a big way, that's more or less what we need to see. And who knows what the short-term consolidation looks like. I think that we're going to get a 618 retest before this first leg up is over. I can't tell you what the heck the consolidation will look like after. I'm just using this first leg up as an example from 2019, but this is what we're going to be looking at. And so if we're looking at the same thing for Ethereum, we're pretty much going to be looking at Ethereum coming all the way back up to this 618, or at least around to it, which is going to be around, I would say, $3,000 to about $3,500 per Ethereum. And what I see for Ethereum, it looks so identical to its very first market cycle, and that's what gives me a lot of inclination that we're going to actually have a much greater cycle that's much more parabolic, I should say, than what we saw in the last one. Our very first cycle for Ethereum, our first leg up, is pretty much the same as what we just went through. And Ethereum literally consolidated right on top of those prior all-time highs. And we did temporarily go below them for just a short while, but for the majority of this entire bear market bottom, we consolidated on top of those in the same way that we did that in 2016. So it would make sense that if the market structure is going to look like 2016, it has the very real potential to continue to play out like that as well. Now, what we saw in that first run up that led to our short-term blow off top, this was 2016. And we went through roughly the exact same sort of accumulation in here. And then that led to this double bottom, our final run, and then that was the top here. And so the same sort of W formation leading to this final capitulation was roughly the exact same thing we went through right here, leading into that capitulation into June. And so the market structure itself looks very much the same. The difference is the time in between. We have a much more lengthy process of accumulation that's going to ultimately be leading us to those same type of expansions in price. And so where I think that we are, ultimately, if we're comparing that cycle in 2016, I think that we're at this exact same point. The only difference is, like I said, the time in between. This double bottom is the same as this one. It's just much, much greater period of consolidation inside of this bottom to this bottom here. And now we're breaking out, sort of starting that next run up inside of this leg here. And I don't believe we're just going to instantly blast off like that shows. I don't think that that's going to be the likelihood scenario at all. But I do think a retest upwards of this 618 being our first lower high into the bear market, and then a reconsolidation of some kind, who knows what that looks like, leading into, most likely, it's going to be sometime midpoint next year before we really start to see all-time high breakouts, which has just been the case up to this point. So if we're going to follow a normal cycle, we don't really need to get too ahead of ourselves. Even if we start breaking out like this, there will be pullbacks along the way. So I mean, even if you see the market run all the way up, ETH goes to $3,500, there will be a period of reaccumulation to get back into the market, or at least I think that there will be. If we go through another reaccumulation pattern, and then we go all the way into the midpoint of 2024, leading into that halving before we really get a lot of new all-time highs, then you don't want to end up FOMO buying into the top when you had all of this extra time to just be patient with it and let the market come back down to a price that was suitable for you to enter. So these are what I'm thinking going into this next cycle. But the second that this total market cap chart breaks out of this resistance is where I believe the altcoins are going to start outperforming Bitcoin. And a lot of that has to do with the Bitcoin ratio, with ETH against Bitcoin. I like to share with you guys this ETH against Bitcoin ratio because of the fact whenever ETH outperforms Bitcoin, altcoins as a whole are outperforming against Bitcoin too. So when we saw in 2017 was Bitcoin actually getting outperformed by altcoins, and that was indicated by Ethereum having this massive cycle. Our entire last bull run was just this consolidation. It was more or less the build up before that new all-time high breakout. So I think that a lot of the reason why we see the market structure looking so identical to that first cycle leading into 2017 has a lot to do with the fact that in our last cycle was more or less just the build up before the cycle that we're in right now is going to actually be going into price discovery. When ETH goes into price discovery against Bitcoin, there is going to be a huge amount of money flooding into altcoins, and I think that we see the early signs of that. If you look at the market, it, there is so much meme coins out there. There are so many different sort of projects that have nothing more as a get-rich scheme. And so if you look a lot of these projects out in the cycle, we see a ton of memes. And we never really saw that in some of the last cycles. And so I think that that is kind of early a signal to the fact that we're probably going to see a lot of upside inside of these altcoins. And so with Ethereum building up, it's just creating this kind of long-term uptrend. And now the uptrend, in my opinion, is actually getting even steeper. And what we just went through over the last recent while was the completion of our first impulse up. And then I believe that we actually just finished the correction back down. And it could peak back down slightly lower, but for the most part, we're finishing the ending points of this corrective phase. And so once this is finished, we're going to be starting that next leg up that I think is going to be running all the way up to this lower high, being 0.122 BTC. And so this is going to be the point where we're going to expect to see the altcoins really starting to take off. When we look at Bitcoin dominance, hide these drawing tools, we are at the top of this resistance right here. So if we are going to see altcoins outperform, I think that it's either going to happen very soon or in the short term, Bitcoin ultimately makes one more final leg up. It's actually able to clear this resistance before starting that continuation to the downside. And then ETH against Bitcoin makes one final sell-off like I just shared with you. Regardless, this is going to be a continuation pattern for Bitcoin to the downside. And that's where we're ultimately going to be able to see Ethereum outperform against its Bitcoin ratio. This cycle is leading up to be much, much bigger. And so all of the early signs are there. The fact that the price structure looks identical to that 2016 cycle, the fact that Bitcoin itself is already breaking out and having a long-term consolidation that was bigger than the last one, and the breakouts that we've seen thus far look like they're going to sustain to the 618. That's kind of what I'm betting on personally. So there's going to be people that disagree, but this is kind of the way that I'm personally going to be trading the market over this next while. So I think that all of this is important to factor in. Where can Bitcoin go? I think that Bitcoin over this next cycle can easily go to $150,000. But in the same way that I think that we could have a massive cycle like what we saw in 2017, it's really hard to say what price we're going to be going to. But I would say what I thought we were going to be going to last year was 250,000. That's this target that I'm going to be sticking to going into this next cycle, because I think that now that we've had even more time worth of reaccumulation going into the buildup of this next cycle, 250,000 seems like a likelihood scenario, especially if we're going to end up seeing something like 2017. So I wanted to give you guys this video to summarize some thoughts, give you guys some perspective that you probably haven't heard. If you found value in this, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of these videos. If you guys want to join the Discord server and follow all my trades, see anything that I'm investing in over the course of this cycle, all of the Arbitrum picks, anything new that's coming out. There's been a lot of different things that we've been investing in, a lot of different layer 2s, things that I think are going to be taking off in a massive way. And so if you want to ever know what the heck I'm actually invested in, you want to be able to direct message me and ask me specific questions about the market, you can always do that by signing up inside of my website. Links are in the description. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And with that being said, I will catch you in the next one. As always, peace out.